Ask any kid what their favorite subject in school is, and you'll likely find some who love science and those who just are not interested at all. But our next guest is finding a way to tap into their left brains without provoking any anxiety. Science journalist and New York Times bestselling author Gregory Moan is here to tell us how he's making science fun for kids. Good morning, Gregory. Or is it Greg?
Well, so it is Greg, but when I had my first book come out years ago, I was going to put Greg Moan on the cover, and my mom said, no, I didn't name you Greg. Your name is Gregory, so it's got to be Gregory Moan. So
well, mothers always know best, don't they?
Absolutely, and just because you grow up doesn't mean you're allowed to stop listening to them.
Exactly,
so, yeah.
Exactly. Well, speaking of parenting, a lot of parents do want to get their kids more involved in science, but it can be a challenge. Share a little bit about your background as a science journalist and being a co-author with some big names in science like Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Right, so I've been, writing for Popular Science magazine for a very long time, longer than I care to admit. And, for a while, I was just doing straight up journalism and writing about science and how it works. And then I met Bill Nye, actually out in California, and we went surfing together. Long story, we don't have time for it. But he told me, he said, hey, Greg, it would be really cool if we did some novels that could get kids excited about science and technology. Because that was actually what sparked his interest in science when he was a kid. And so that set us off on our own series of novels, and I kind of carried that idea through with my latest one, which is set in Atlantis.
Yeah, so let's talk about your new book and how it centers around the lost city of Atlantis.
Well, so the book follows kids from two different worlds, really. So we have Kaya, who's a girl, an Atlantean girl, who's been told her whole life that Atlantis is the only world, and that there is no life on the surface. But she's incredibly curious and stubborn, and she just believes that can't be true. So she tries to find her way up to the surface. At the same time, as a couple kids, Lewis and Hannah, stow away with Lewis's sort of mad professor father as he's searching for Atlantis. Pretty soon, the three of them run into each other. Lewis and Hannah and the professor are mistaken for invaders.
Oh, man.
And Kaya leads them on this crazy chase through Atlantis. Yeah.
Well, it sounds very adventurous. And we've seen, obviously, blockbuster movies about Atlantis or related to Atlantis. But how does the science part work into this? And what does science tell us about what that might be like if it existed?
So a lot. One of the first questions I had is when you see movies or read comics about Atlantis, you always have mermaids, right? And I think mermaids are cool. I wish I was a merman. It'd be awesome, But I started talking to scientists about this, and one scientist in particular was fascinating. His name is actually, ironically, Frank Fish. He's a biologist, and he has a side interest in mermaids. And he started telling me what mermaids might actually look like. They'd be bald, they'd be shaped more like a seal. They wouldn't really have arms. They'd have more like flippers, and they'd have gills. And I started picturing this, and I thought, I do not want mermaids and mermen in this book because they sound horrifying, right? So that was kind of my first rule, was no mermaids and mermen. And then, the other piece was, I think if Atlantis existed, the people down there would be furious with us because of what we're doing to the oceans, and that brings us around to this Earth.
Yeah, for sure. And talk about, the importance of, I guess, not only just education about science, but when we talk about the ocean health and how you're helping kids learn about that, especially if maybe they're having a hard time getting into science.
Right. So, look, the oceans are critical because we get most of our oxygen that we breathe comes from creatures in the ocean. The ocean is a huge carbon sink that helps regulate and balance out our climate. And, also, it's amazing. It's beautiful. It's filled with these incredible life forms. And so I just fundamentally believe that we really need to take care of it. Now, in terms of getting kids interested in that, I find that fiction and adventures are kind of a sneaky way to get kids interested in these bigger topics and bigger issues. Some kids, they'll be interested in the issues straight out, right? Other kids maybe need that little added fun and adventure and mystery to kind of spark their curiosity.
So how's that working out? How are these books? What kind of feedback are you getting from parents and the kids that are reading them? Also, what age range are your books written for?
So, they're kind of age 8 and up, and, I like to think of it as 4th, 5th, 6th grade. In the back of my books, I always have a, kind of a section explaining the science in the book. So kids can read about these weird, wild ideas, but then they go to the back and they say, oh, okay, this is based on real research. And I found that people really react to that. They respond to that. From librarians and teachers to parents, they love that they can find out about the real science that worked into the story, and maybe even go follow some thread and look it up themselves. And I still talk to scientists today who say, oh, I build robots because I read Jules Verne when I was little.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah, so you might be inspiring that next generation. And I have a soon-to-be fourth grader, so I may have to check out your book and put it in front of him and see if it piques his interest. Greg, we're out of time, but I really enjoyed talking to you about your new book and some of your work. If you want more on his adventure novels and science books, you can visit GregoryMoan.com.